It's that time of the week again to get your geeky fix on. Hello and welcome to Chat TPK, a podcast with killer conversations all about geek culture. It's me, Mike, and after a small week break, we are back with another episode for you to enjoy. A massive welcome to any regular listeners of the pod, as well as those who are tuning in for the first time, who may have stumbled across this pod looking for stuff about D&D, video games, and geeky TV shows. Then we have you covered here on Chat TPK. We're going to be discussing all about how D&D has had a massive impact on the world of video games, and then give some initial thoughts on the upcoming release of the new Player's Handbook. I would like to welcome back to the pod a man whose knock-knock jokes can open any magical doors. It's Rick.
Knock knock.
Knock knock, who's there?
Centaur.
Centaur who?
I centaurly hope you're going to let me in.
I give that a 4 out of 10. That wasn't terrible,
yeah.
But fantastic. But yeah, it's good to have you back. We've not had you on the pod for a couple of weeks now, and you are missing your partner in crime. That is Martin. Fortunately for him, he has. I don't know whether you would want me to mention this, but we are sending lots of love and congratulations. He has had a child, and hopefully he'll be back with us in a few weeks' time when things settle down. But then, Rick, do things ever truly settle down when you have children? I would imagine not.
I don't know. I've not got any.
Yeah, same here.
I don't know if you're allowed to play D&D anymore when you have children. I thought we were all virgins.
Yeah, geeky virgins who haven't never touched grass or the lips of a lady.
Correct. We might have to ban him from our campaign because he has tangible proof now that he has touched a lady.
Well, that's it. And to be fair, our DM, Sam, also has got children. And I think, you have got a few of the players. But it definitely does make scheduling a bit more difficult, as if D&D needed any more difficulties to schedule with. That's one of its barriers to entry, for sure.
He has all of my love sent to him.
Yeah. We'll hopefully hear from him soon. I guarantee he does love listening to the pod when he's not on it. So a big hello to Martin and congrats to both you and your wonderful wife. Anywho, focusing on today's topic about how D&D, which is something we both love, has had an impact on video games. I actually think maybe just before we do jump into that, I know I've just said we're going to go into it, but just before we do jump into it, as you are our sole guest today, I would like the listeners, and probably myself, because this is probably something we haven't necessarily discussed a lot. What is the thing about D&D you love the most, Rick?
I think I actually love making characters the most.
Mm-hmm. How many have you got?
Oh, so many. So as many as D&D Beyond allows me to have, plus the ones that cycle around in my head repeatedly. Mm-hmm. I just really like going, this person, creature, big dumb idiot, is going to be like this, and they're going to do this. This is going to be their voice. This is going to be their personality. And then never, ever, ever get to play them. Because when you join a campaign, it lasts for 2 years and you play the same character. And then if you join a one-shot, you get to maybe show them a tiny bit, and then they have to go back in the box. So I would say I've made more characters than I've played in D&D
it's possible
campaigns.
to ever play with. Yeah, that's fair. Oh, that is kind of the double-edged sword of it. Like, it gives you so much customization, but do you ever get truly, the freedom to access that in a campaign? Not always, unless you're getting your character killed quite often.
And I'm not above that.
No. To be fair, I have played in campaigns where someone has gone, I'm really quite sick of my character now. I've made some poor life choices in choosing this one. And out of campaign, they've just said to me, can we kill them off? And we thought of some interesting way in which they could have met their demise without the other characters latching onto this. And it kind of, it was fine. But
I would prefer that to happen more organically, and then just to be like, well, that's the end of that story. They died an ignoble death in a ditch, having been stabbed by several goblins, more than likely. And then the conversation happens after, because obviously everyone, when your character dies, acts as if you have lost a loved one, and they're like, are you okay? Can we do anything? Depending on the campaign you're playing in, obviously, but certainly all the ones I've played in where a character has died, the DM has come to me later and gone, what do you want to do from here?
Yeah.
And every time I've gone, that's that. If some
New character.
if some powerful magic comes in to bring them back, sure, I'll keep playing them. But that's not my decision anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with things like Revivify or Resurrection or those sorts of things, it might potentially give you an option to carry on. But, I mean, speaking from experience of DMing Tomb of Annihilation, that's not a possibility because of the death curse. So I've got currently, if they are listening, hello to my players of my Wednesday game. They have got a couple of players in quite a sticky situation where death is a real possibility for them. And we've been playing with those characters, as you say, for like 2 years. Because that's how long campaigns take to play, and it would be like losing a loved one again, as you say, part of them which they would unfortunately eternally lose. But yeah, you say characters is your favourite thing about D&D. Can you tell us about one of your favourite memories that you've had since playing in D&D at all?
This is like I've gone for a job interview. You've thrown a curveball at me.
That's
The
okay.
one that immediately springs to mind is I was playing a half-orc paladin who was a paladin of the god of death
Interesting choice. I like it. That's
in
cool.
a homebrew campaign. So I decided that he wouldn't be like ha 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 murder 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 kill kill kill. He would
Yep.
be those that are undead need to go to their proper resting place and be destroyed, and then death is death. But he had lost his son to his village being burned down. And it was this whole
Okay.
thing that he needed to get his son back. And every now and then, the DM would bring in the god of death to have a conversation. And his god of death was really, he was like, oh, I don't really like you. You work for me, but I don't really like you. But he was like a tsundere, if you know the saying. So he liked Kurotar a bit, but he was like,
Yeah. Just suffers them. Just
he's just like, you work for me, do as I say. And he had a thing in which if anyone looks the god of death in the eye, they take a certain amount of damage. And
Ooh.
if you're statting a god, they have to do some things. Anyway, it culminated in my character was being really stubborn and was just a stubborn half-orc guy, like he wouldn't back down to a challenge. He looks the god of death in the eye, and I get the, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to do this?
That's never good.
And in the least sort of disruptive way, I had to be like, well, it is what my character would do at this point. So he looked him in the eye. He took something like 65 damage.
Nasty.
Which
what level were you at?
Level 4. So it would have killed him.
Ow. Yeah.
But because he was a half orc, I was like, well, that reduced me to 1 HP. Because of relentless endurance, and it was just a really good way of the mechanics and the role play working.
Thematic.
Of him hanging on to life just from being so stubborn. looking this god in the eye, and the god looking away, being like, God, I don't actually want to kill you. But yeah, that was really good. I actually left that role play conversation sweating, being like, oh God, what have I done?
That's always good when it actually has an actual impact on you outside of the game. So just shows how invested you were with that character, doesn't it? So nice. Awesome. Well, hopefully the listeners at home can relate to that and have some interesting ideas of their own. Now, if you are listening to this pod, you can join us on our Discord, which is, we've had a few more people join us recently. So come and talk to us on there and tell us about your favourite experiences within D&D. So let's have a think about D&D and its impact on games. D&D's actually been around for quite a long time, hasn't it, Rick? I'm probably going to say, 40, 50 years? In fact, I think 1974 is when it first came
50
around.
years this year. It's the celebration of it, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah. It's the 50th year. It's the half century. But Gary Gygax brought it around initially, and then it kind of got bought up by a bigger company and kind of just became its own thing after leaving TSR. It's now owned by Hasbro, the big Goliath of board games and stuff. So there's a bit of probably ill feeling towards it currently in terms of the way it's maybe managed by Hasbro and lower down Wizards of the Coast. But undoubtedly, even though it's about to approach its 5.5 or I know Martin says it's 5.1, but the newest edition of it, it has had previous editions, and each of them have brought with them new things, which I think has inspired video games somewhat to include newer features. So what sort of things do you think D&D, Rick, has brought to us that a video game has thought, oh, I'll nab that idea and run with it? When has it been done successfully, would you say?
Well, the main one, I think, is HP.
Oh, yep.
Because
Hit
if you
points,
look
yeah.
at games from the 70s, you get hit once and you die. So, like Pac-Man and
Oh, of course, yeah.
Pikmin and just a lot of those games that are, if you see a Sonic,
Asteroids.
Sonic was later, but yeah, something
Space
hits you,
Invaders.
you explode. You have 3 lives. After that, especially with RPGs, you end up with a pool of hit points that increase as you level up or get better. Leveling up's probably another one, actually.
Yeah, we can mention that shortly. But so, yeah, I think even Super Mario, when it first came out, one hit and you're dead pretty much, unless you've got that magic mushroom. So there was a bit of a switch, as you say, with the RPGs bringing in HP. Do you think that was done in order to... Do you think players themselves were maybe a bit frustrated? Do you think they lack the patience that was required with a game where you only have one hit and you're dead? That requires some decent skill, doesn't it?
It's hard to say, isn't it? Because video games were very different then. So
yeah,
gaming's quite mainstream now. Like a lot of people do it. Loads of people play COD. Loads of like just normal men play FIFA and all sorts of games. Fortnite's really popular.
All genders, of course, can enjoy playing video games, but no, yeah. I do get what you mean.
Video games are now for everyone, but they used to be for hardly anyone, or hardly anyone played them. If you were a video gamer in the 70s, you were a nerd,
a savant.
Yeah, and you wasted all your pocket money putting quarters into a machine.
Yeah.
So I think probably not, in terms of your question. The gamers probably weren't frustrated with only having one life because they were putting their pennies in to get another one.
Yeah.
But it certainly made it a lot more niche to pick something up and go, this is going to be really hard. I need to perfect it and get really good at it to complete it.
Yeah.
Because like nowadays, you pick up most video games and you don't have to be very good and you can complete them.
No. It's a lot more casual, isn't it? It's a lot more appealing for the casual player. So, and as you say, because it's become so mainstream, if every game was super difficult, then you wouldn't really draw that big audience, would you? We've spoken in the past about something like Elden Ring. I think that probably is, and those sorts of Dark Souls games do feature that HP system. It's still hard as dicks though. So
they do feature that HP system, and I think it's entirely possible that I'm playing it wrong, but I'd say 85% of the time, if a boss hits me, I'm dead anyway. So I may as well only have 1 HP.
And that's where that skill-based gaming comes in. You need to, as I said, I think we said on our Elden Ring pod previously, it's about that pattern recognition. But yeah, hit points in general have been pushed throughout video games.
But as well with Elden Ring, sorry, I know you keep trying to move on.
No, you're good. It's okay.
It's Elden Ring, Dark Souls games are hard, but they're very forgiving where you start from. You don't lose anything when you die, particularly, because you can go and re-pick up your souls or your runes. You start from a 5-minute run away. You don't have to start the whole game again. And while it's hard, while you can bang your head against a brick wall of a boss for 3 hours and not get anywhere, it's not you don't beat that boss on the first try and you have to start again, which is what video games were. And even so, Elden Ring and Dark Souls games totally divide the community on people going, this is too hard, I'm not playing it, and people going, this is really hard and I love it.
So I would say that's slightly different to the way in which you would approach a game of D&D, in that you haven't, if you're dead, you pretty much lose everything for that character, don't you? So having HP as a mechanic in D&D gives you that kind of buffer, that kind of like warning as to, I need to think carefully here. I've got limited HP. I need to really, really be tactical with it. And you have that time in D&D because it's not happening actively, is it? Whereas something like a video game actually is. So yeah, HP has transcended. I think it's been used in not just RPGs. It's been used in stuff like Doom. You have HP in that, and that's quite early 90s, isn't it? And
Yeah.
all sorts of video games, whether it's fighting games.
It was used in Halo as well, which you wouldn't think
Halo,
of
yeah.
having a HP mechanic. But the first one, you had your shield and then a bar of HP, and then they moved away from it to your shield being your HP.
Yeah, and that recharges, but yeah, it still technically is kind of like your health, isn't it? Because once it's gone, you're dead. Minecraft is another one I think's got a pretty good HP mechanic, and kind of links to hunger, which again is in D&D. Not having food does give you exhaustion. So.
Well, yeah, first edition D&D as well. The 1974 version was if you didn't have food, you were dead. If you it was very unforgiving. It was essentially
like survival mode sort of thing.
Yeah, Gary Gygax's way of torturing his friends.
Fair. And like it depends on the campaign, depends who you're playing with, and you can have some campaigns where you're really strict on foraging and getting the water and getting the food and getting the supplies and tracking all your everything you could use, your ammunition. Some people play it really religiously like that, and some people might do the complete opposite, where you have breakfast and they just like hand wave it. And in terms of brevity, you kind of want to push yourself through the story, and sometimes things like that can get in the way. So it completely is up to how you and your party like playing, I think.
The books do specifically call that out in that they say, while you're traveling, if you're getting rest, you can forage enough for yourselves to live off, unless you're in, the desert or something.
Yeah, where it's a bit less realistic. But so HP, as we mentioned, one thing that I think D&D has really brought to the forefront, as I think we actually already have said as well, is leveling and experience points. And I can't think of many games that don't include that kind of system now, whether it's your character improving their stats somewhat by achieving a certain, by beating a level on a game, or actually getting that experience. One of the games that I think does this so beautifully well is something like Final Fantasy. Like that is just intrinsically tied to leveling. It's not until like the later ones where you can actually have that customization as to where you start to distribute your stats. But even the earlier ones, you level up, your HP goes up, your strength or something goes up, all the little things increase. And yeah, I just thought that gave you the reason to keep on grinding, keep on playing, keep on getting better.
Absolutely. A little ding and a hit of endorphins. Like that's what World of Warcraft did so well.
Yeah.
And obviously Warcraft was sort of semi-based on Warhammer, which was sort of semi-based on D&D. So it all trickles down.
And D&D was pretty much based on the work of Tolkien, the fantasy world of Tolkien, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So that's where its roots kind of are. And we obviously see that in things like Lord of the Rings as a film, and also has games as well. There are so many similarities between the films and D&D. Like we've had our discussion, is Aragorn a ranger? Like that's a class within D&D, and that's a character from Lord of the Rings. So there are so many different similarities that we see bleeding over. But leveling, I think, is a really, really good feature. It obviously only goes up to level 20 in D&D. I don't think many people ever play a game that actually gets there. I've only ever played level 20 in a one-shot, never in a campaign.
Yes, I've never played a campaign that gets there. The thing with it is, and I'm going to go off on a tangent again, it's a tangent day. It's so hard to manage when your players are pushing sort of 15, 16, 17, 18. That level, they go, oh, well, I'm a wizard. Something going on the other side of the planet? Cool. Click. Off we go.
Yeah, plane shift or something like that. Yeah.
There's no travel needed. There's none of that. And
it trivializes a lot of things.
It does trivialize a lot of things. They just have answers to everything. You run a combat and your fighter goes, well, thank you for this +3 magical greatsword of set everything on fire. I'm going to attack 8 times with it. Goodbye to whatever's in front of me.
Yeah. It just means that the DM has to work twice as hard trying to
Yeah.
think of something. Yeah,
And
that's actually worth a challenge for them.
JRPGs do that quite well. Of you get to higher levels and you go and you punch God in the face, but at level 1 you started popping slimes for 20 gold,
Mm-hmm.
and
You
obviously
see that
that's a bit,
progress.
yeah, that's a bit of
Yeah.
a meme that Japanese RPGs
Yeah.
you always go and beat up God, but it is kind of true, and
Something similar, yeah.
you do feel your level sort of getting better and you guys becoming tougher. Like the first time I did it and I was like, oh, actually, we're badasses now, was
Mm-hmm.
do you remember Final Fantasy VII
Yeah.
when Genova's there and you see her for the first time locked in the
Mm-hmm.
lab where you meet Red 13 and you're like, holy fucking shit.
Yeah.
That's a scary thing. We've got to run
Yeah.
away. And then later on like disc 3 or whatever, you
Yeah.
see
When
her
you're more
and
a
you fight
badass.
her and she is tough. She's a hard boss, but you're like, yeah, we've got this now. This
You probably
thing
would have
that,
gone down in one turn
yeah,
against her
exactly.
previously. Yeah.
This thing that
So,
scared the hell out of me 10 hours of gameplay ago, now we can beat up.
I mean, just to further that point, in D&D, a level 1 character against, say, I'm thinking of the combat from Mines of Fandelver, that initial goblin combat, it's only like 3 or 4 goblins, can TPK parties. But then
Yeah.
you put that against a level 10 party, it's over in 1 turn. It's not even a threat. So just having those levels and all the different things that they bring, whether that's ability score improvements, or whether that is feats, whether that is class features, it just makes every character, also the hit point increases, makes every character that much better. And you would have thought if you've leveled up that character, you've got to know its strengths and weaknesses really well, so you use it better as well. So that's just obviously where D&D is using leveling up really well, and I think it has made the jump to video games successfully, for sure.
It would be nice in D&D, because you never really do it. Everyone balances encounters around the party. It would be nice to go back to where you started from without the fate of the world being in your hands, and then someone goes, oh, please, adventurers, help me. There's been a few goblins marauding my countryside. And you go, and there's 3 goblins when you're level 20, and you just absolutely annihilate them. Like, because in some video games, you can go back to the starting area and it's, level 1 slimes and you meteor storm them. But sometimes in D&D, it does feel a bit like the enemies get more powerful at exactly the same rate that you do.
Yeah, and you never really face those previous types of creatures that you were once seeing so often. So as you progress, so does the things you're combating. So you never really feel godlike in that sort of sense, obviously, unless you're a level 18 or 19 or 20 wizard, of course, because essentially then you are a god. But
I mean, bards as well, I would argue.
Yeah. Okay.
I know bards get overlooked a little bit with the amount of power that they get, but they are powerful creatures.
Yeah. Other things that I think D&D has had within its features that has been utilised elsewhere is stuff like races and classes, to be honest. I know, obviously, again, this does link back to Tolkien having things like elves and dwarfs and orcs. Just before we had I pressed record, we had a little good chat about orcs. And how actually they were one thing within D&D and within Tolkien. They were quite small, decrepit, almost like goblin-like sort of creatures, and they've kind of been turned into something completely different within later editions of D&D itself and other video games, like as we said, like Warcraft and Warhammer and the like. So how have they changed, would you say, Rick?
Well, let me ask you this: think of an orc.
Yeah.
What colour is it?
I would say green in my head.
Tolkien's orcs were brown and grey and all sorts of horrible earthy colours.
But Uruk-hai, they were quite dark skinned, weren't they?
Dark red, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's Warhammer's influence on orcs. They went, we think they're green, and then Warcraft took that and went, yeah, orcs are green. Orcs that have been corrupted by the Fel are green, and orcs that haven't are brown now, lore-wise.
But I think I remember seeing that Warhammer, the Warcraft film, where you did see the different colours. But like even just looking at them, they are 8 foot, like 7-8 foot tall, much bigger than humans.
Absolutely stacked.
arms bigger than most people's torsos, and you compare that to the orcs in Lord of the Rings, like
Well,
the
who are
little
like,
ones,
bleh.
the ones from Mordor, like
Yeah,
they're not
little
even 5 foot
horrible,
tall.
little horrible conniving creatures that you would associate with goblins. Or if you look at the Japanese orc, that's a pig, man.
Oh,
So they are bigger and they're round. So yeah, actually, originally D&D orcs were the pigmen, and
yeah,
as these three things of Warhammer, Warcraft, D&D, and Lord of the Rings have influenced each other, orcs have become
yeah.
these big burly
It's kind of
scrappy
like
guys.
fusioned, haven't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you think about the playable race, half orc. It has like
Hmm.
the features of like savage attacks or relentless endurance, which would make you think of the big, burly orc itself. So it has, yeah, as we say, taken some things from this fusion of ideas that's happened across the
Yeah,
years.
the same thing has happened with halflings as well. That in Tolkien's work are these fat-bellied fellows who are jolly and like to eat a lot, and then
Yeah, airy
slowly,
feet.
yeah, as people have probably player-based this actually, as more and more people have played them as these cunning, tricky rogues. I mean, Bilbo was already a burglar, but he was also
Yeah.
a wimp and an absolute chub. They've become these little sly, slippery, tricky, lucky creatures, haven't they? So if you think of
Yeah.
the art in 5th edition book, none of them have got the big fat bellies and the dungarees on.
No.
They're all dressed
No, the nimble.
in leather armor, and they're really nimble.
Yeah. I think that's even one of their features, isn't it? Nimble. Or it
They
might,
can
or
like
could
run
that
through
be
people's legs and stuff.
yeah, exactly. And again, you've just mentioned about Bilbo being a burglar and a rogue. You kind of get typecast in certain species playing that certain different job, that certain role, that class within the game. So you think of humans typically, maybe potentially being like a paladin or something, a holy warrior, or a wizard. You don't necessarily tend to think of other races, other species as they're being called in the new PHB, being a wizard, and elves being
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sort of ranger sort of class. So you do have these stereotypes, I guess they've become
Elves
because they
being
are,
druids and rangers and
yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah, and that is in part due to the fact that until a couple of years ago, until Tasha's came out 5 years ago, whenever you picked a race, they had ability scores tied to that race, didn't they? That would
yeah.
increase better. So it would make sense to be
So it complements, yeah.
yeah.
But I think that's all been overhauled now, so you can have a lot more customization. It's a lot less rigid in that sort of sense. So that will be quite exciting to see how we look to implement that in our future gaming sessions. But yeah, as I say, races and classes used throughout games, going back to something like I think I played Borderlands recently. There's
Yeah.
4 potential classes to play, and they all come with their own benefits, just like D&D. If you want the big burly tank sort of character, thinking back to something like a barbarian, it's going to be able to take more damage. It's going to have more HP. It's going to be able to hit hard. It will be slower, maybe, but all these things kind of I think help players make a bit more of an informed decision about who they're going to choose, their own sort of play style, and yeah, it opens it up more to those casual players because they've had previous experience with similar sorts of classes in other games. So
Yeah, absolutely. It does translate well because if you even back in the 70s you had like warrior, wizard, and I don't actually know, elf, I think it was one of the classes. Yeah, it translates well because you already know what you're getting in for. If you go, oh, I want to pick the scoundrel, which is a class, you think immediately of a tricky little rogue guy, don't you?
yeah, so here are the 3 main character classes that were in the original D&D game back in 1974. You had the cleric, the fighting man, which I guess is just a fighter, and the magic user, which I guess
Yeah.
is basically a wizard or some
All,
sort.
all magic users, yeah.
Yeah, and then Greyhawk added thief as the 4th main class, and then later on Paladin was made as a fighting man subclass. So it started out quite basic, and it's blown up into. I mean, how many classes do we have now? Is it 12?
Yeah.
I think it's 12, excluding artificer, however you want to say it,
Whatever.
excluding that one because that's not in the PHP. But I think the PHP has 12, and it all stemmed from just 3, which is quite impressive as to how much they've expanded upon this and how games have adopted it as well. Because I'm trying to think of like World of Warcraft that has loads of different types of classes you can choose from. Similarly,
Yeah.
different types of species and races.
Very true.
What else would you say that D&D has brought to the table that video games has managed to snack on?
Spell lists would be the
Okay.
next big thing. I think. Well, not
Yep.
the next big thing, but the next thing that came to my mind. So having a list of spells that you can cast that once you cast them, you forget them for the day is referred to as Vancian magic a lot of the
Ooh.
time
So like one
because
and done sort of spells.
yeah, and that was how everything was done. Because why is it called Vancian spellcasting? Directly modelled on the depiction of magic in the works of Jack Vance, like The Dying Earth from 1950, where you pick a spell and you cast it and it disappears from your mind. That was how spells were all the way up until 3rd edition of
Oh.
D&D.
Okay. So like how you would probably typically use a scroll nowadays, obviously unless you're a
Yes.
wizard.
Yeah.
So okay. I think lots of games have featured that sort of mechanic, in which you grab a spell, you use it, and Skyrim. I know I used to haul loads of scrolls and never actually use them, but yeah, that's
There's
interesting.
actually a mod for Skyrim. Is it Apocalypse? Which changes the spells around. And one of the perks you can get in that is called Vancian Magic, which means that you can only cast your spells once per day, but it makes them more powerful.
And you mention once per day. That kind of links to how D&D kind of developed the spell slots and how like you'd regenerate them on certain types of rests and stuff. Is that feature used within video games?
Oh, yeah, all the time. If you think of Dragon Age,
Yeah.
Dragon Age almost, I mean, honestly, it almost exactly rips its mechanics from D&D, but
Yeah.
they have spell slots and amount of spells you can cast per day. Even if you look at a sci-fi setting, Knights of the Old Republic
Yep, for sure.
has spell slots that you can use for certain things and maneuvers. In fact, I think Knights of the Old Republic, one of the best games I've ever played, Star Wars wise, by the way. Maybe that's based on 2nd edition D&D, but in space. So it's not just fantasy.
Yeah, I was having this discussion as well with a listener of the pod, Dave. Hello, Dave, if you're listening. He mentioned how Knights of the Republic utilizes the D20 system as part of its RNG, and how you hit them and like your weapons get like a +5 to hit and all those sorts of things. So that's in terms of mechanics, that's been beautifully embedded within Knights of the Old Republic for sure. But yeah, second edition potentially, and I think other games that have done it really successfully where you can use an ability just once. I mean, I don't want to hark back to something as we've already said, like Elden Ring, but you can use obviously incantations in there. But then
Then you can use those as many times as you have mana for.
true. I've mentioned Borderlands. You have like class abilities that, whilst they don't have to wait until the next day to use them, they have things like cooldowns. So whilst it's not a whole day, not a long rest sort of situation, a cooldown is quite commonly used.
Yeah.
So that you don't spam an ability, and that kind of makes you aware that, that ability is quite powerful. I should probably wait and use it at a good time, just like in D&D.
And then you never ever use it.
Yeah, potentially. If you, for instance, got a 6th level spell, you've only got one spell slot. You can use it once per day, once per long rest. You're not going to use it on the tiniest creature that you come across. You're going to wait for something big just in case. You're going to keep it in your back pocket, and that gives it some gravitas, makes it really seem like this is a decent spell that's going to pack a wallop.
Yeah. Have you ever played Kingdom Hearts?
Yeah, Kingdom Hearts is a great game. Yeah.
That uses Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days uses the panel system.
Yep.
Where you use your panels to fire and forget your spells.
With D&D really starting to utilize things like spell slots, so you can cast any of your spells so many times a day, and there obviously are ways of getting that back. Is that similar to how games have used stuff like mana or FP, or games use it in different types of ways, AP, or just like points in which you can spend to use your abilities?
Well, yeah, because there was always in D&D an alternate system called spell points or whatever they called
Okay.
it, where you would get a certain amount per level and you could spend them on casting your spells.
Hmm.
And that's essentially what mana is, and has been since 1997 or whatever. Where
Mana's probably like the JRPG name for it, really,
yeah,
but
but
similar sort of
once you're
thing.
out of mana, you have to either rest or wait or drink a potion or use a resource to get it back. So that's
Hmm.
very similar to the spell slot system, except more fluid. So it's more like what sorcerers would do.
Yeah, and obviously they've got their sorcery points, haven't they? So
Yeah, that gets used all over the place. Like you'd be hard pressed to find a game based in fantasy that has spells in it and not a mana bar or
yeah,
slots to cast it on.
for sure.
Even harking all the way back again to Knights of the Old Republic. Go and play Knights of the
Hmm.
Old Republic. This is a
Yeah.
sign.
It
You
holds up
get
well. Like, graphically, it isn't great, but just like
graphically.
mechanically speaking, it's good.
Yeah, I think graphics you forget about fairly quickly, or I do.
Yeah,
If I'm into a game, unless it
yeah,
absolutely like spreads a missing texture across the whole thing. If it's just a bit clunky and a bit old, I can suspension of disbelief that fairly quickly.
yeah.
But even
It's
that
also what.
has go on.
No, I was just say it kind of depends what you're playing the game for, like what you get from the game. If it's to have full immersion, then maybe graphics might be higher on the agenda for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah, even that has force points. The Witcher, he has
Hmm.
his signs, but he can only do them for a certain amount of time.
Yeah,
I
for them
think
to
he can.
regenerate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of like feature has been present throughout a lot of different games, and there are so many different things. I know we've mentioned a few, but there are things like turn-based
Hmm.
that we could
Hmm.
really go into some good detail on. There are things like homebrew and how things have nowadays been more modded and stuff. And there's things like world building, etc. And loot. Loot's a big one. So I
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
think there's a lot more on the table for us to discuss and maybe make a part two out of this, because I think there's so much more we could say about how D&D has influenced games. Just before we look to go and say cheerio for this week, in terms of the PHB, it is coming out next month. I believe it's coming out on September the 13th.
Which is soon.
Apologies, September the 17th it comes out. I think it comes out slightly earlier if you've got a master tier subscription or if you pre-ordered it. So, but they have allowed people that are reviewing the PHB, because some people have been sent copies, early copies, to be able to make this sort of press material and learn the differences. I myself have been reading up and watching a lot of this stuff, and I've made a couple of I guess assumptions, because again I've not read it myself yet, but some of the things that I've drawn from this that have both got me excited and maybe a little bit apprehensive are weapon mastery. We have mentioned this with our little look at the different classes. That's something I really love and definitely think was needed for martial characters because they were severely lacking. Would you agree that weapon mastery has been a big positive coming from this PHB?
Everyone loves weapon mastery. I can't argue against it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Does it bridge the gap,
No,
do you think? No, it's not enough, is it?
it's fun. It'd be nice to be able to push people around and knock people over and give people advantage and stuff, and then you can be doing what the cleric usually does and going, oh, remember you have advantage, or remember you've got blessed because I
Hmm.
knocked that guy over last turn. But it's scalability. That's the thing. So it used to
Yeah.
be something referred to as linear marshals, quadratic casters, where every level casters square themselves
Hmm.
and every level marshals add one.
Yeah.
So
It's quite basic.
yeah,
Yeah.
casters were very, very, very squishy. And if you made a sorcerer way back when, they had 4 HP at level 1 because you didn't used to
Yeah.
add your con mod and you didn't used to get the max dice and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But obviously, a fighter would have a bit more. And spells scale really well.
Yeah.
So even if you find an 8th or 7th level spell that's a bit shit, because some of them are, you can
Hmm.
upcast a 3rd level spell to be absolutely devastating.
Well, you think about Chromatic Orb, it's an okay spell at level 1, but then you upcast it level 3, 4, 5, and it adds more damage to it. If you've
Mm-hmm.
got a sword and you're a 15th level fighter, that sword's predominantly going to do similar sort of damage as it would at level 1.
Yeah, still does the same amount of damage. And the argument is you can make more attacks with it, but then you look at Scorching Ray.
Yeah.
As you upcast that,
beams.
You already make 3 attacks at level 2, so you're already making more attacks than the fighter can. And then you just get more and more beams from it. Like
Eldritch Blast as a cantrip.
Cantrip scaling in damage as well is something that I'm a little bit against, because they should be your last resort of a certain amount of spells. But a cantrip like Toll the Dead,
there's a
does
go-to.
3d12 damage at level 11.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Which, if you have your fighter that has to roll to hit every time, and I'll grant you they get a save against Toll the Dead, but you have to roll to hit every time, and you can
if your DC's high, then
you can do up to 3d12 with your giant two-handed maul, and you have to get there. Yeah. You can't be 120 feet away.
Yeah.
But
So weapon mastery is one thing that's from the PHP that I really like. You mentioned about spells and how they've in some areas been made slightly better, which might be worth therefore picking up the PHP to utilize. But how have they been made better? Right.
Some of the wording's been changed on a few spells, like emanations is the new thing. So most of the spells, like Spirit Guardians and Moonbeam and Cloud of Daggers and things like that, have been changed to have the same wording to them, in that when you end your turn in the spell, or the first time you enter the spell on a turn, you take the damage, instead of it being random between the spells. But it used to be just like, it was either when they start their turn there, when they end their turn there, or when they enter it for the first time on a turn, or any combination of those 3 things.
I felt like some of those spells, you would look up the wording every time you use it, just to double check, which ruins the flow. And if you've cast it, someone else might be thinking, oh, actually, should it not happen? It's causing maybe confusion within the party sometimes, or I guess in some degrees, if you take it super seriously, it might even cause an argument. So I'm glad they've kind of normalized it through these different types of spells and made it, I guess, in that sort of sense, much more accessible for players to use within the game. So hopefully the wording is been made clearer for new players of the PHP to use. One thing,
and Blade Ward's a bit better.
And Blade Ward is a bit better, because before it was absolutely useless. So, well, not useless, just very, very unuseful. It's not really worth the action you spend to use it. Hey ho. So spells a big tick in the box. One thing that I think from the PHP that I like as well is the fact that in the old PHP, some classes only got 1 or 2 subclasses, and then some, like the wizard, got 8.
Yeah.
They've made it 4 across the board, which is perfectly weighted, perfectly equal, and I think is a good sign, because people like playing fighters as well, and if there's only 2 fighter classes, it's not as much choice, not as much customization.
That's true. Yeah, I do like that. And you can, for people who are absolutely up in arms, you can still use your old subclasses, but
it's all compatible, isn't it?
Yeah, you get stuff that you would have got at level 1 and 2 with your subclass at level 3, if, say, you're picking a sorcerer one, or a warlock one, or a wizard one, or anything that got its subclass before. So they are still backwards compatible, but if this book is the only one you own of the player's handbooks, I like that it has 4 choices for everyone.
Yeah,
it's quite nice.
That's good. And even for people that, as you say, might have or might be irked by the fact that you have to wait to level 3 now to get those certain features, level 1, level 2, even in a campaign, generally speaking, you'd get through those levels fairly quickly within a few first 4 or 5 sessions, you'd imagine. Obviously, it's dependent.
Yeah, you do 1 session at level 1, 2 sessions at level 2.
Yeah, it goes quite quick. So it's not something you have to lump for long, is it? But
it is a little bit weird that as a warlock, you make a deal with someone, but you don't know who that is until 2 levels later.
They reveal themselves. These are the people that you've been drawing power from. Surprise.
I
Yeah,
signed
that
this
is
contract,
interesting.
but it didn't say anyone's name on it.
I was so stupid. It was a devil. But yeah, no, fair play. Other things that the PHB might be bringing to us. They mentioned about crafting. Crafting's had a bit of a slight overhaul. Although from my reading of it about crafting and how it's changed, it's only been given about a page and a half, and
Oh.
it hasn't been given the amount of detail that maybe you would want it to have. It hasn't been fleshed out to the point where, oh, I need to spend this long to create this amount of materials, etc. It gives you some guidelines on how long and what amount of money you would need to spend to make something like plate armor, for instance. So it gives you a formula for that. But using the formula
Yeah.
from this PHB, apparently it would take like 500 plus days in order to craft plate armor.
Okay.
And it's like, well, that's not really what you're using crafting for.
That was the same in 2014, wasn't it? You can add 20 gold's worth of value per day to make something. So,
Yeah.
yeah, making your plate armor would cost you the rest of time, where you could just go out and kill
I
goblins in the
mean,
forest.
would it, if you're a blacksmith, you wouldn't be spending a whole year making one plate of armor or one suit of armor, would you? You'd be able to do
Probably
it
not. No,
much
because
more
you'd
rapid. Like,
have starved to death before you finished it.
exactly. So it in that sort of like realism, like, yeah, you get the tool proficiency. Great. I've got the skills. If I go find all the materials, it's still going to take me 500 days to make it. It's just, yeah, no, doesn't make much sense in that
The
respect.
the dungeon dudes made a really good crafting system in their most recent Kickstarter.
Ah, is that Dungeons and Dragonheim or
Yes.
is that yeah,
Yeah.
nice. I think that's something we're going to be playing soon. So that's exciting.
Yeah. So they had a thing where you can make sort of vellum from the skin of monsters, because monsters are
Nice.
infused with magic. You can take
Mm-hmm.
their blood, you can take their bones, and you can do that. It takes 10 minutes to do, and each monster is only viable to give bits for 10 minutes, so you can't do too much
Yeah.
faffing. And then when you have a recipe and a forge, you and the equipment, you can make the thing.
Yeah. And that's weird because that's something you see a lot in video games where you craft stuff, and it's just not really a massively utilized feature within D&D, I don't think. So
Yeah, I thought they'd want to get in more. So
yeah.
obviously they've made mistakes in the past of trying to be more like video games, like with 4th edition, where they were like, look, we're Diablo 1 now. Go on a dungeon crawl and explode stuff for loot with your spammable abilities. But you would have thought with the success of things like Rust and Ark and Minecraft and all that stuff, where
Yeah.
you craft things and you can build yourself up and build your base and stuff. I know there was a little bit of talk about how in the Dungeon Master's Guide there's going to be the Stronghold, where you can make stuff. They featured that a little bit, but you'd have thought they'd have been like, hey, let's muscle in on that and
expand upon that a bit more. Yeah, for sure. Now, as we say, the PHB will come out on September 17th. I'm gonna try and get a copy of it as soon as I can. Thankfully, I have got that master tier subscription, so that might be possible. And we'll do a podcast based upon a bit more of a in-depth look at this and things you can expect. Maybe should you buy this if you're a brand new player, or I mean, it's going to be the same price as the current PHB, and I imagine that will still be. It might not be in print, but it might still be accessible for you to buy. Anywho, I digress. And I guess all that I have left to say now, Rick, is a massive thank you for joining me this week. It's been wonderful having you.
It's all right. Anytime.
It's
well, I say that I've not been available for 2 weeks. So
and to be fair, neither have I.
I'm happy to visit.
I've just got back from the Olympics, so I've been a bit of a busy boy myself. So, but yeah.
Oh, what were you competing in? Was it breakdancing?
You guessed it. Well done. I can pop and lock with the best of them. And as I say, we are available on all different types of podcast providers. So if you're listening to us here on, I don't know, Spotify, or you're one of choice, we are available on others. So you can always go follow us there. We have got Discord as well. We are a small but growing community, so come check us out on Discord and come chat to us and answer our weekly questions, and also things
Join
like
the Discord.
Yes, definitely.
And my name is Mauve.
Mauve, yeah. If you see Mauve on there, that is Rick, and I think I'm just down as Mike. So yeah, come chat to us on there. We have also got YouTube as well, and also Twitch. So yeah, come check us out and say hello. Right, Rick, I'll speak to you soon. I hopefully will play with you on Tuesday. Fingers crossed. We should be having some D&D.
That'll be nice. It's been a while.
It has been a few weeks, as it has for the listeners at home of the podcast. Have a happy and healthy week, all. We'll see you on the next one. Adios.
Goodbye.
Bye.